Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. I'm Ken Calvert. For the sake of background, once again, my roots, 45 years in classic rock and roll and some talk radio. I'm entrenched in all things rock and roll and music. And, of course, my dear friend, Father Joe Grimaldi. Well, Father Joe Grimaldi taught me in high school, and we got back together again, and we've managed to stay in touch. And we decided, why don't the two of us get together and do a podcast? And you thankfully agreed to do it. So welcome back. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, and I'm happy to be able to do this with you, Ken.
Well, there's one thing for sure about both the Catholic Church and just day in, day out life, is that we're going to find a topic. And unfortunately, today we have found the obvious topic because on Wednesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, also Ash Wednesday, this horrible, horrible, horrible mass shooting occurred in Parkland, Florida. Several people were injured, 17 dead, 14 children, 3 adults. And it just begs the question that you must be overwhelmed by parishioners asking you, and I suspect it'll be at the pulpits across the country this coming Sunday, why does God act in such mysterious ways when it comes to something like this? How could a fair and wonderful God allow something like this to occur?
Yeah, my answer, first of all, is that God is not allowing any of it. It's happening because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in as human beings. You have a lot of people who are mentally disturbed, who are in need of help, psychological and otherwise, and they're not recognized or they're not dealt with the way they should be, getting the care that they need in the proper places. So they run loose in society, basically. And every so often, you're going to come across a loose cannon who's going to go shoot up as many people as he can for the fun of it. Now, is God allowing that? I don't think so. What's happening is that people who are disturbed and who are not getting the care that they need just are allowed to continue on with life as if nothing was wrong. The other thing is, it's a very complex question in my mind. I imagine that there were an awful lot of people who knew this individual, the shooter, who knew this individual, and they never said a word about his condition.
He was bragging about and actually doing YouTube videos of his weapons, and he had conversations with other students discussing the fact that he was looking forward to a potential mass shooting. He killed animals for fun.
For fun, yes.
He was screaming, I have a disconnect going on. He was screaming, I have serious issues. He lost his mother. He was staying with friends who allowed him to have a gun in the house in a safe. Just everything about this was wrong, and we're finding out about it now, but they knew about it before. And so there are so many different angles to this, Father, that it makes me so angry that we tend to focus on the one element, and that element is the weapon. And now, of course, the melding with the mental health portion of it. But there's so much more to this.
There is. For example, if you see something, say something.
Yes.
How many people actually follow that? Obviously, from what you just mentioned, Ken, it's not happening because a lot of people knew about this fellow. A lot of people saw what he did on YouTube. A lot of people knew that he had suffered the loss of his mother. A lot of people knew that he was living with friends who knew that he had weapons. I mean, how can this go on, you wonder? And so we say that little phrase is so important. If you see something, say something. But I doubt that people really follow that. As you mentioned, it's a complex issue, but go ahead, Ken.
I had a question for you because I'm just wondering if there's that element within the church. Social media has become such a huge part of our lives, all of our lives. Without social media, we wouldn't be doing a podcast.
I agree.
Especially the younger generation, and of course the millennials in my generation. The internet crept into radio in 1992, thereabouts. And then, of course, it exploded. And, of course, the smartphones, the texting, the various applications that are available on the phone for these kids to communicate and whatnot. Okay, I get it. I understand it, and I understand the fascination and the importance of it. However, how do you communicate that in the Catholic Church to an audience that may not be attending? Well, you can't because they're not attending. But if they are attending, how do you get their attention?
Well, obviously,
there's a tough one for you.
Yeah, it is. It is a tough one. We as ministers cannot be afraid to talk about these things, whether it be in conjunction with the homily itself, whether it be calling a special meeting, particularly the churches that have schools attached. I think it's important that the minister gets involved in discussing these items with the parents so that they may become a little bit more aware. However, let me put it this way, just because somebody speaks doesn't mean somebody else is listening. And I think that's one of the major problems that I see too. Whether you say it in the homily, whether you say it at a meeting, you have to have people who are open to the message. If they're not open to the message, your preaching could go on for days and it won't mean a thing because they just won't accept it. They have their own thoughts on the situation, particularly when we speak about the use of guns, the ownership of guns, who should have guns, what kind of guns should people have, and so on and so forth. I think, it's such a complicated issue that it would take forever to discuss each aspect of it on its own. And I think what we're trying to do here today, because it's such an overwhelming situation that we see in Parkland, Florida, that we're trying to find answers because, well, just because.
We have to discuss it. And I found what you were saying very interesting. Are they paying attention? Are they really listening? And that's a really good point. Unfortunately, a week from today, we're going to be on to another topic. What we're discussing right now will not nearly have the passion a week from today that it has right now.
Unfortunately, because as a society we're being hit with so many different situations all the time that we can become jaded, and even in a situation like this, that even a day later you go on to normal everyday business and forget about what happened in Parkland unless you're there. But I think it's what you say is very, very important. I mean, I'm just thinking when somebody is speaking to an audience of, let's say, 100 people, you're going to have almost as many interpretations of what the speaker said, because each person who is listening takes away whatever they want to take away from what they heard. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to me that even after a Mass on Sunday, different people come to say goodbye as they're leaving, and they comment on the homily. And it's never going to be the same between two people. Somebody heard this, somebody else heard that, somebody didn't hear anything, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of interesting how we are as human beings listening to this. But I think also because we do become jaded as a society, because every day we're facing so many different things, the media being so strong. I mean, I hate to sound like an old timer, but I am. And so years ago, we didn't have access to information so quickly as we do today. Everything is instant. You hear that these 17 young people or people were killed almost a few minutes after it happens. Mm-hmm. Years ago, you would not have heard about it for a week or so because we were just too far away. The media wasn't as strong. Oh, and you may have heard it the day after or something, but it's not the same thing. Today we're bombarded with all sorts of news constantly, by the minute, actually by the second. Okay, so it's easy to become jaded. However, this does not take away from the discussion on weapons. That's a very big discussion in our country. I'm mixed on that. I'll be honest with you. There are times when I say we need weapons, where we need to be able to carry weapons. Now, of course, there's this whole issue of teachers carrying hidden weapons in the classroom. I just don't like that at all. But by the same token, people are trying to protect themselves, and this is what they can come up with. However, one thing we can do is something similar to what Australia has done, and that's to eliminate
The automatic weapons.
the automatic weapons. Huh? And if we could at all make some sort of a dent in that problem, maybe we could have some success, as Australia has.
You know where the pushback will come on that, though, is that those guns are already on the streets, and the people that want them will get them.
Looking at the statistics in Australia, it has cut down on this kind of shooting. I don't know how, but it has.
Well, listen, I'm in favor of anything that's a starting point.
That could be. I mean, obviously, people are discussing it seriously at the present time. They have to be, because there's so many different aspects.
Well, it's going to be discussed, and it has been discussed, and you will continue to discuss it. And like I said, you'll take it to the pulpit. I suspect you will this Sunday. The final part of the conversation, at least relative to the Parkland shooting massacre, is the only way to describe it, is the fact that there's such a divisive component in our country right now anyway, that politics will become an even bigger part of it now, and it's going to continue to even widen the divide. And do you have any sort of pastoral ministry responsibility to try and tell people at the end of the day, let's all do our best to just get along?
Of course I do. You know what's interesting to me? Somebody tried an experiment on a very small basis of having dinners for a small group of people once a month, but making sure that the guests were picked very strategically. So you had those who were pro-Trump, let's say, and those who are liberal Democrats coming together, having a meal together, discussing different issues together, and the outcome seems to be at least a better understanding of accepting an opposite opinion. I don't know if that could work on a national level, but at least it's a beginning. I think anything that we could do to unify, we're human beings, huh? If we could recognize that much, and we're human beings that have intelligence, we should be able to discuss things in a civil way. We should be able to try to understand why people are thinking the way they do, even though they're different from the way I think. And this might help us bring us together. But I think that's one of the things that we can be trying, and certainly that's one of the things I would love to preach as part of the homily on Sunday.
A lot of priests are politically active. Do you try and avoid that arena?
When you say politically active, in what way?
Well,
Because they shouldn't be.
what is that?
I mean, speaking politics in church, is that what you're saying?
Perhaps. Or rallying for a certain cause. That would be...
Yes, but rallying for... Now, here's a whole different issue, too, though. I think you have to consider what they're rallying for. We could easily mix up what is moral and political so easily. Huh? You take abortion. The Catholic Church has been against abortion, always. Why? Because of the moral issue. However, it's been made into a political issue by the various politics. It's a nice way of making it political. But and that shouldn't be the only thing, okay? Human life, respect for human life. That's a moral issue. When the priest or the minister or whoever is rallying for a particular cause, we have to see what they're really rallying for. Peace, justice, moral issues, not necessarily, but all of those things can be interpreted as political issues, and this is where the problem is.
If there was if there was going to be an anti-automatic weapons rally this weekend, you and I would easily attend. Mm-hmm. Seeing as we both totally agree about the banning of automatic weapons.
Correct.
You and I would march in concert together.
Correct.
And
yes.
you would have no issues with that whatsoever.
But it would not be a political issue that we're rallying for. We want
Well, technically, people would draw from it that we
were.
Of
course they were. Yeah,
you
of
know
course
what I mean?
They were.
Because we would be opposing the NRA.
Yes.
Therefore, we would be considered liberals rather than formative thinking conservatives.
That's if they
and who's
know
to say?
us.
As I learned a long, long time ago, and I maintain this today, that when I was on the radio for 45 years, I never once even mentioned any sort of loyalty to one side or the other. I simply was an independent, fair-minded, listening human being who was willing to take in any and all ideas that you wanted to suggest to me for me to at least consider.
Sure.
All right? Because the moment that you go one way or the other, you divide your audience, especially today, more than ever, 50-50.
Ken, I'm with you on that. I would do the same.
And do you take that attitude then to the pulpit?
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not there for the Democrats or the Republicans.
What about when you're invited into people's personal lives to discuss a possible issue where we just can't get along, but basically because of the fact that we're so different politically?
Well, this is what I was trying to point out. When you have a smaller group and you're invited and you have people who have different thinking, it's a good thing to try to listen to one another to see where they're coming from, so that we could at least understand why they think the way they do. And I think that's part of the problem. We don't know why. We just consider them as enemies, and that's it. Well, I think there's more to it than just that. I mean, as rational beings can have opinions, and they make those opinions up according to what they've seen and to how they affect society.
I want to end on a light note if we can. Done a beautiful job, by the way. Thank you, and
Thank you.
I appreciate our discussing this because we had to. I mean, earlier in the week we had a different direction we were going to go in, but we had to, and I insisted that we discuss the situation in Parkland. But we were talking about the division and how politics separates people, and it has for such a long, long time. But I have a group of friends that have been playing golf together for years and years and years, and they take that Northern Michigan 3-day, and there are two diehard, hardcore conservatives, and there are two, and this is not a joke, there are two hardcore, all-in liberals. It has gotten to the point where they have to drive separately. There's two in one car and two in the other. And then when they get to the location, they all agree, they all stay together, okay? They get a condo or some sort of an apartment or a home or whatever, and they stay together, and the first person up gets to turn on the television. So it's either going to be CNN or Fox.
Exactly.
And they have to live by those rules. And that's the way these guys end up starting to get up as early as 4:35.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Just to win at all costs politically.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the sorts of things that I think you can bring up at a party when you have that divisive group, because it happens with my friends all the time.
Sure.
And I elect to just all of a sudden go into the other room and get myself a nice cold lager and sit back and relax and enjoy the flavor of an ice cold beer.
Well, the easy way out is to just not talk about politics.
Well, thanks. Anything else what else is happening quickly on our calendar this weekend?
Oh, this weekend. What else?
Yeah,
is
we're
happening?
gonna say some masses.
Well,
How many
it's
masses?
It's the first Sunday of Lent. Tim.
It's the first Sunday of Lent.
Yeah, we speak about Jesus in the desert and so on. And actually, it's more the idea of changing our hearts and trying to have a conversion, which means turning the hearts towards good and avoiding evil. It's as simple as that.
What a compelling tease. Coming up on the next Father Joe podcast, we will discuss that very topic. How's that?
A metanoia. A metanoia.
Indeed.
I've enjoyed it. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.